From the moment humanity joined the Empire's dominion, it was clear they were different. Where other species bent to the Empire's will, humans resisted, driven by a stubbornness that bordered on madness. The Empire saw potential in their resilience at first, exploiting humanity's adaptability in their unending wars. But as the years passed, a single name emerged from the chaos, whispered with reverence among human colonies and disdain within the Empire's command chambers: General Gerald Ford. Ford's ascent was the kind of story that the Empire hated. Born in the industrial ruins of Earth's eastern sprawl, he had clawed his way into prominence through intellect and audacity. Early in his military career, Ford earned a reputation for rewriting the rules of engagement. His tactics were as unpredictable as they were effective, often turning his enemies' superior numbers against them. This earned him respect among humans, but something far more dangerous from the Empire: a place on their secret hit list, a ledger of individuals deemed too dangerous to live. Within the sterile confines of a deep space imperial dreadnought, high-ranking officials convened in secret. A holographic projection of Ford rotated slowly before them, his piercing gaze frozen in time. "The Wolf of Sol," one of them muttered, the nickname humanity had given Ford after his decisive role in the Martian Rebellion. "He's not just a general," another replied. "He's a symbol. Every victory he wins emboldens them. He makes them think they can defy us." The room grew tense. Assassination was the obvious solution, but Ford's brilliance extended beyond the battlefield. He was notoriously cautious, his location guarded by layers of security and loyal operatives. Attempts on his life had failed before they even began. But the Empire was patient, and when they couldn't strike directly, they turned to something far more insidious. His family. Gerald Ford's only son, Michael, was everything his father could have hoped for: a bright, idealistic young man who worked tirelessly in humanity's fledgling starship development program. Michael had inherited his father's sharp mind, but channeled it into creation rather than destruction, designing vessels that could one day rival the Empire's own armada. He was a man of science, not war, a fact that made him a perfect target. The Empire's agents moved quickly and quietly. On a distant orbital station where Michael worked, they engineered an accident, a subtle failure in the station's artificial gravity systems. When the support beams gave way, the collapse was instantaneous. Reports labeled it a tragic malfunction, a freak incident that claimed the lives of dozens. Ford received the news while en route to inspect a human-controlled outpost near the outer rim. The message came with the sterile efficiency of military protocol. His son was dead. Ford read the report twice, his expression unchanging, even as the words seared into his mind. He locked himself in his quarters for hours, staring at the holographic images of Michael's smiling face, his graduation from the academy, his first engineering project. The memories played on a loop, each one twisting the knife deeper. For a man who had faced death 1,000 times, the loss was unbearable. But grief for Ford was never a passive state. It smoldered within him, fueling a rage that sharpened his focus. He replayed the details of the so-called accident, dissecting every line of the report until the truth became clear. This was no malfunction. It was a message. The Empire had struck not at him, but at the one person who connected him to his humanity. That night, Ford stood alone on the observation deck of his command ship, the Titan's Dawn, staring out at the stars. His officers respected his silence, giving him space as he wrestled with emotions they could only imagine. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of steel. "They think this will break me," he said to no one in particular. "But all they've done is show me their weakness." In the weeks that followed, Ford's demeanor changed. Gone was the calculated strategist who weighed every decision with precision. In his place stood a man with singular purpose. His plans shifted from defense to offense. His orders laced with an urgency that electrified his fleet. Ford wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was preparing for vengeance. Word of Michael's death spread quickly among human colonies. sparking outrage and uniting factions that had once been divided. To them, Ford's loss was their loss, a reminder that the Empire would stop at nothing to keep humanity in line. But it also gave them hope. If someone as untouchable as Ford could suffer, then perhaps he could also triumph. In a quiet corner of the Titan's dawn, Ford reviewed intercepted communications, each one a piece of the puzzle that led back to the Empire's shadowy operatives. Among the data, one phrase stood out: Project Black Talon. The name was unfamiliar, but its implications were clear. It wasn't just Michael. The Empire had a broader plan, one that aimed to extinguish humanity's brightest minds. Ford's fist clenched as he leaned back in his chair. The Empire hadn't just killed his son. They had declared war on the very future of his people. He activated a secure channel, summoning his most trusted advisors. Within moments, the holographic forms of Commander Elias Drake and John Cook flickered to life before him. "Gentlemen," Ford began, his tone calm but laced with an undercurrent of fury, "we have a new mission. The Empire thinks they can break us by cutting out our hearts. I say we show them what happens when you back a wolf into a corner." Drake nodded, his jaw tight. "What's the plan, sir?" Ford's lips curled into a grim smile. "We're going to find this Project Black Talon, and we're going to tear it apart piece by piece. And then, we're going to make them regret the day they ever heard the name Gerald Ford." The men exchanged glances, each understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. This wasn't just a mission. It was the beginning of something much larger. Ford's loss had become humanity's rallying cry, a spark that would ignite a fire the Empire could not extinguish. As the Titan's dawn prepared to slip into hyperspace, Ford stood once more on the observation deck, his son's hologram flickering faintly in his palm. "Michael," he whispered, his voice soft but Titans, "I couldn't protect you. But I'll make sure they never hurt anyone like this again. I promise." The stars stretched into streaks of light as the ship jumped into the void, carrying with it a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Ford's rage burned like a star gone nova, contained only by the iron will that had defined his career. The loss of his son had left a void, but instead of consuming him, it had sharpened him into something unrelenting. The Empire had expected him to crumble, to retreat into grief or madness. Instead, he transformed, redirecting his pain into a warpath that would shake the galaxy. He began by tightening the bonds between his fleet. The men and women under his command had always trusted him, but now they followed him with something bordering on fanaticism. They saw in him a reflection of their own losses, their own fury at the Empire's cruelty. Ford had become more than a general. He was the avatar of their defiance. His speeches were few and far between, but when he spoke, every word carried the weight of conviction. He promised them justice. He promised them victory. And they believed him, because they had seen what he was capable of. The first step was gathering allies. Ford's fleet alone was not enough to take on the might of the Empire, but humanity's scattered colonies were filled with those who had suffered under imperial rule. Ford sent envoys to the farthest reaches of human space, delivering a simple message. The time for survival was over. It was time to fight back. The response was slow at first, but as the stories of Ford's loss and his growing resistance spread, the trickle became a flood. Ships arrived from every corner of the galaxy, piloted by men and women ready to risk everything for a chance at freedom. Among them was Commander Elias Drake, a grizzled veteran who had once served under Ford during the Martian Rebellion. Drake was a blunt, no-nonsense man, with scars that spoke of decades of battle. He had retired after the rebellion, content to live out his days in quiet anonymity. But when he heard of Michael's death and Ford's call to arms, he left everything behind to rejoin his old commander. "I've buried enough friends to know when a fight is worth it," he said simply when Ford asked why he had returned. Then there was John Cook, a rogue genius with a knack for hacking and sabotage. Cook had no love for the military, but his disdain for the Empire outweighed his disdain for authority. When Ford approached him with a request for assistance, Cook had laughed. "You don't need me, General," he had said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You've got fleets and soldiers and all that fun stuff. I'm just a guy with a keyboard. Ford had replied with a single sentence. The Empire killed my son. That was all it took. Cook didn't ask for payment or protection. He simply packed his gear and joined the cause. With his inner circle assembled, Ford began planning his first strike. The target was an Imperial outpost deep in contested space, a seemingly insignificant facility that housed a relay station for the Empire's communication network. Taking it out would cripple their ability to coordinate in the region, buying Ford's forces the time they needed to regroup and expand. It was a bold move, and one that the Empire would not expect. Ford knew the risks, but he also knew the importance of momentum. Hesitation would mean death. The operation was executed with surgical precision. Cook hacked into the station's security systems, feeding false data to the Imperial monitors while Drake led a small strike team to disable the outpost defenses. Ford himself remained aboard the flagship, overseeing every detail with the meticulousness of a chess master. When the dust settled, the relay station was a smoking ruin, and the Empire's forces in the region were left blind and disoriented. It was a small victory, but it sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Empire's propaganda machine tried to downplay the attack, but the truth spread faster than they could suppress it. For the first time in years, humanity had struck back, and it had struck hard. The colonies celebrated, and Ford's name became a rallying cry. But the victory also painted a target on his back. The Empire could no longer ignore him, and they began diverting resources to hunt him down. Ford welcomed the challenge. He knew that every ship they sent after him was a ship that wasn't enforcing their will elsewhere. He turned his fleet into a ghost, slipping through Imperial patrols and striking where they least expected. Fuel depots, supply lines, and weapon caches became his targets, each one a critical blow to the Empire's war machine. His tactics were unorthodox, his strategies unpredictable. He fought like a man with nothing to lose, and the Empire found themselves constantly one step behind. But Ford's war was not without cost. For every victory, there were losses, ships destroyed, men and women killed in action. Each casualty weighed on him, a constant reminder of the stakes. Yet he refused to falter. He carried their memories with him, using them as fuel to drive him forward. He spoke often of his son, not in anger but in admiration. Michael believed in a future where humanity could stand on its own. He told his officers during a briefing, "I intend to give him that future, no matter the cost." As the weeks turned into months, Ford's forces grew bolder. They liberated a prison colony where the Empire had been using human captives as slave labor, an act that earned them not only new recruits, but the admiration of countless colonies. They ambushed an Imperial convoy carrying experimental weapons, turning the enemy's own technology against them. Each success brought new challenges, but it also brought new opportunities. The rebellion was no longer just Ford's fight. It had become humanity's fight. Still, the Empire was not without its own moves. Ford's intelligence network intercepted whispers of a project known as the Stellar Scythe, a weapon of unimaginable power. The details were scarce, but the implications were clear. If the Empire completed the scythe, it would spell doom for the rebellion. Ford knew that his warpath could not continue indefinitely. Sooner or later, he would have to confront the Empire head-on. The thought didn't frighten him. It invigorated him. Every battle, every sacrifice, every moment of pain had been leading to this. As he stood on the bridge of the Titan's dawn, watching the stars streak by through the viewport, Ford allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought of Michael, of his bright smile and unshakable optimism. "I hope you can see this," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I hope you know that I'm doing this for you." His thoughts were interrupted by Drake, who approached with a data pad in hand. "We've got intel on the next target," the commander said, his tone as grim as ever. "It's a big one." Ford nodded, his expression hardening. "Then we don't waste time. Let's remind the Empire why they fear us." The Titan's dawn surged forward, its engines roaring as it plunged into hyperspace. Ford's warpath was far from over, and the Empire was about to learn that their greatest mistake had not been underestimating humanity. It had been underestimating him. The Titan's dawn emerged from hyperspace like a predator slipping through shadows, its sleek hull absorbing the faint light of the distant stars. The crew moved with quiet precision, their movements a testament to the discipline Ford had instilled in them. This was no routine mission. They were deep in Imperial space, closer to the heart of the enemy than they had ever dared to venture before. The stakes had never been higher. Ford stood at the command console, his sharp gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. The target loomed in the projection, a massive Imperial shipyard, its sprawling structure encased in a lattice of automated defenses. This was not just any facility. It was the Empire's primary manufacturing hub for the stellar scythe. Intelligence reports indicated that the weapon was nearly complete. If it left the shipyard, it would be unstoppable. Ford had no intention of allowing that to happen. Commander Drake stepped up beside him, his face carved with lines of tension. "This place is a fortress, sir. We're looking at orbital turrets, fighter patrols, and enough firepower to vaporize a fleet." Ford nodded, his expression unyielding. "Which is why we won't fight them on their terms. Cook, are the infiltration protocols ready?" John Cook's voice crackled over the comms from the ship's operations bay. "Ready as they'll ever be. I've piggybacked our signal onto an Imperial supply convoy heading into the shipyard. Their scanners will read us as one of their own, but it won't hold for long once we're inside." "Long enough," Ford replied. He turned to the assembled strike team, a hand-picked group of soldiers and engineers who had proven themselves in countless skirmishes. Each man's face was a mask of grim determination. Ford's voice cut through the tense silence. "You all know what's at stake. This shipyard is the heart of their war machine. If we destroy it, we don't just cripple the scythe. We send a message that the Empire's strength is not invincible. We don't get second chances. We go in fast, we hit hard, and we get out alive." "Understood." A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the chamber, and the team dispersed to their stations. Ford remained where he was, his eyes still fixed on the hologram. Drake lingered, his voice low. "You sure about this, Gerald? This isn't just another raid. If this goes south..." Ford didn't look away. "If this goes south, then we die knowing we took the fight to them. That's more than they ever expected from us." The plan unfolded with clockwork precision. The Titan's dawn and its accompanying ships used Cook's hacked transponder codes to slip into the shipyard's perimeter. The convoy they mimicked was scanned and cleared by the automated defense systems, their false credentials holding firm. As the fleet docked, Ford and his strike team disembarked under the guise of Imperial engineers, their stolen uniforms and credentials allowing them to move through the shipyard unchallenged. The enormity of the facility was staggering. Colossal scaffolds cradled the skeletal frames of dreadnoughts and cruisers, each one a testament to the Empire's might. Above them, a half-completed superstructure hung in the void, the stellar scythe. Its size dwarfed even the largest ships Ford had seen, and its angular design radiated menace. Seeing it in person, the threat it posed became all too real. Cook's voice crackled in Ford's earpiece. "All right, you're approaching the central reactor core. That's where the fun starts. I've got a bypass on their surveillance grid, but you'll have a 3-minute window before the system flags the anomaly. Make it count." Ford led the team down a series of maintenance corridors, each step bringing them closer to the core. The air was thick with the hum of machinery, a constant reminder of the Empire's industrial dominance. They encountered no resistance. Cook's hacks ensured that every door opened seamlessly, every camera turned away at the critical moment. It was almost too easy. When they reached the reactor chamber, the scale of the task ahead became clear. The core pulsed with a blinding blue light, its containment field crackling with energy. A network of conduits radiated outward, feeding power to the shipyard and the stellar scythe above. Disabling it would require precision and speed. "Set the charges," Ford ordered, his voice steady despite the urgency. The team sprang into action, attaching high-yield explosives to the conduits while Ford and Drake monitored the chamber's entrance. The first warning came from Cook. General, we've got a problem. That surveillance grid I bypassed? It just reset itself. You've got inbound hostiles. Ford's jaw tightened. How many? All of them. The sound of boots on metal echoed down the corridor, followed by the unmistakable hum of blaster rifles charging. Ford didn't hesitate. Drake, cover the team. Everyone else, double time on those charges. We're finishing this, no matter what. The first wave of Imperial soldiers burst into the chamber, their black armor gleaming in the reactor's glow. Ford and Drake opened fire, their precision honed by years of combat. The air filled with the searing heat of energy bolts, each shot a desperate bid to hold the line. The charges were almost set when a new figure entered the fray, a towering Imperial commander clad in advanced exoskeletal armor. He moved with the grace of a predator, his presence commanding attention. Ford recognized him immediately. Admiral Cale Theron, the architect of countless Imperial victories, and the man rumored to be overseeing the stellar-sized construction. So, the infamous Gerald Ford, Theron said, his voice amplified by his suit. I expected more from the Wolf of Soul. Ford didn't flinch. And I expected less from a lapdog of the Empire. Theron's response was a blur of motion. He lunged forward, his suit-in-hand strength sending Ford sprawling. The two clashed in a brutal melee, Ford's agility pitted against Theron's raw power. Around them, the battle raged, the strike team desperately holding off the advancing Imperial forces. It was Cook who turned the tide. From his remote station aboard the Titan's Dawn, he unleashed a cyber attack on the shipyard's automated systems. Turrets meant to defend the facility turned on their own soldiers, creating chaos that gave Ford's team the opening they needed. Ford seized the moment, using Theron's distraction to land a critical blow. With a swift movement, he disabled the Admiral's suit, leaving the imposing figure crumpled on the floor. Ford didn't waste time with a victory speech. Charges are set. Fall back. The team retreated under heavy fire, racing against the clock as the shipyard's alarms blared. When they reached their ships, Cook's voice was calm despite the chaos. You've got about 30 seconds before that reactor goes boom. Might want to step on it. The fleet disengaged from the shipyard just as the first explosion rippled through its superstructure. The sight was both horrifying and exhilarating. The stellar side's incomplete frame disintegrated in the blast, taking the surrounding facility with it. Ford watched from the bridge of the Titan's Dawn, his expression unreadable. Drake stepped beside him, his voice quiet. We did it. That thing will never see the light of day. Ford nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the burning wreckage. This was just one battle. The war's far from over. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Empire's shattered heart behind, Ford allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. They had struck a blow that the Empire would not soon recover from, but he knew that the fight was only beginning. The battlefield was a dying star, burning bright with the fury of war. Wreckage drifted in every direction, the remnants of fleets that had clashed with unrelenting ferocity. Ford stood at the center of it all, on the bridge of the Titan's Dawn, his face carved from stone. Around him, the command crew worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their voices steady despite the chaos unfolding beyond the viewport. This was it. The culmination of every sacrifice, every victory, every moment of pain. The Empire had come for him with everything they had, an armada vast enough to blot out the stars. But Ford had not flinched. He had met them head-on, his fleet smaller but no less determined. This was not a battle for survival. It was a battle for humanity's future. The comms crackled to life, and Commander Drake's voice came through, rough but unyielding. We've lost the Vanguard and the Ironclad. Remaining ships are holding the line, but we can't take much more of this. Ford's grip tightened on the edge of the console, his knuckles white. We hold. The moment we break, the Empire wins. Tell the captains to push forward. Drake hesitated, then replied with a terse, Understood? The Imperial flagship loomed ahead, a leviathan of steel and firepower. It was the keystone of the enemy's formation, its presence a declaration of dominance. Ford knew that as long as it stood, the Empire would maintain the upper hand. Taking it down would shift the tide, but it was a gamble. A single wrong move could doom them all. "Cook," Ford said, his voice cutting through the din, "I need options." John Cook's holographic image flickered to life, his usual smirk replaced by a rare look of grim focus. "Options? You mean besides running for our lives? All right, here's what I've got. That flagship's shield grid is tied to a central reactor. If we hit it hard enough, we might overload the system. Problem is, it's buried deep, and their defenses won't let us get close." "We don't need to get close," Ford said, a plan already forming in his mind. "We just need a distraction. Drake, pull our remaining frigates into a spearhead formation. Target their forward batteries and draw their fire." Drake's voice came back immediately. "That'll leave the flank exposed." "I know," Ford replied. "We won't need it. Cook, can you rig a payload to breach the reactor?" Cook grinned, a spark of his usual bravado returning. "Consider it done. But someone's going to have to deliver it manually." "I'll do it," Ford said without hesitation. The bridge fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned to him, disbelief and protest lingering on their faces. It was Drake who finally broke the silence. "With all due respect, General, that's suicide. You're more valuable here." "No," Ford said firmly. "What's valuable is the future we're fighting for. This isn't about me. It never was. If we don't take that ship down, we lose everything." Drake's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue further. "Then I'm coming with you." Ford nodded, knowing there was no point in trying to dissuade him. "Prepare the shuttle. Cook, you're in charge while we're gone. Keep the fleet together." "You got it, General," Cook said, his tone unusually serious. "Just don't make me have to give your eulogy." Ford allowed himself a faint smile before turning toward the hangar. The walk to the shuttle was brief, but it felt like an eternity. Every step was weighted with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Yet there was no fear in his heart, only resolve. This was his moment. The one chance to strike a blow that would shatter the Empire's iron grip. The shuttle launched into the chaos, weaving through a storm of enemy fire. Drake piloted with the skill of a veteran, his hands steady on the controls. Ford manned the weapons, his aim unerring as he cleared a path through the Imperial defenses. The flagship grew larger with every passing second, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the destruction surrounding it. "Brace yourselves," Drake called out as the shuttle dove toward the reactor's entry point. The impact was jarring, the hull screeching as it scraped against metal. They had made it, but the hard part was just beginning. The reactor chamber was a labyrinth of conduits and energy fields, its glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. Ford and Drake moved with purpose, their weapons at the ready. The Empire security forces were waiting for them, and the firefight was brutal. Each step forward was a struggle, every corner a potential death trap. Ford's mind was a whirlwind of calculations and memories. He thought of his son, of the promise he had made on that day of unimaginable loss. He thought of the men and women who had followed him into this fight, their trust in him an unspoken bond. He thought of the countless lives that would be saved if they succeeded. "Charges are set," Drake shouted over the roar of gunfire, his voice strained but triumphant. "Good," Ford replied. "Now let's make sure they detonate." The final push was the most harrowing. The Imperial soldiers fought with desperation, their resolve matching Ford's own. But he and Drake were relentless, their movements a seamless coordination born of years of camaraderie. When they reached the control panel, Ford activated the detonator with a grim smile. "It's done," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. Drake nodded, a rare grin breaking through his stoic exterior. "Let's get out of here." The shuttle was waiting, its engines roaring as it prepared for a rapid departure. Ford and Drake sprinted toward it, dodging blaster fire and explosions. They barely made it aboard before the reactor's overload began. The flagship trembled, its mighty structure fracturing as the core went critical. From the bridge of the Titan's dawn, Cook watched the spectacle unfold. The Imperial flagship erupted in a cascade of light and fire, its destruction rippling through the enemy fleet. The Empire's formation shattered, their remaining ships retreating in disarray. The rebellion had won the day. When the shuttle docked, the crew erupted into cheers. Ford stepped out, his uniform scorched and his face lined with exhaustion. But there was a fire in his eyes that had not dimmed. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice cutting through the celebration. "The Empire's still out there, and they'll come back stronger. But today, we showed them that we won't be broken. We fight not just for survival, but for freedom, for humanity." The crew's cheers redoubled, their spirits lifted by his words. Ford glanced at Drake, who gave him a rare nod of approval. Cook approached, his usual smirk firmly in place. "So, what's next, General? We just took down the biggest ship they've got. You thinking about retirement?" Ford shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Not until the job's done." He turned to the viewport, watching as the wreckage of the Imperial flagship drifted into the void. The war was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had struck a blow that would be felt across the galaxy, a blow that proved humanity's resilience, its strength, and its unyielding will. And as the Titan's dawn prepared for its next jump, Ford allowed himself a single thought. Michael would be proud.